Hi, thank you. I would like to ask you to think about climate change and the ways in which we are wasteful now with little to no regard for the future of the planet we live on. B.F. Skinner wrote an essay on this very topic in 1989 titled, "Why We Are Not Acting to Save the World." In this essay, Skinner argues that our desire to pursue activities and engage in behaviors that bring us immediate satisfaction is exactly what keeps us from acting in our best interest for our future world. And this tendency to pursue that which brings us immediate gratification at the expense of our long-term goals is something that applies to so many contemporary issues in public health, which is what I will focus on today. So each and every year, about 40% of Americans make New Year's resolutions. It may be the case that you made a New Year's resolution this year that relates to exercise. So you may have said, 2018 is going to be my year. I will be at the gym all the time. I am going to get stronger and faster and reach my fitness goals. One afternoon, you were sitting watching your favorite show on Netflix, and you had a plan of going to the gym once the show ended, but now the show is coming to an end and you're actually faced with a difficult decision, a dilemma, a choice you have to make, because it turns out that the next episode of the show is coming on in only 15 seconds. Okay. So now you're faced with a choice you have to make, right? Whether to follow through on that initial plan of going to the gym, or whether to engage in something that seems like a lot more fun in the moment, a lot more immediately rewarding, and actually find out what happens in the next episode of your favorite show, right? So I don't know if anyone can relate to this sort of dilemma, but I know that I certainly can. It could be the case that 2018 is the year of the healthy diet for you. So you know that you should be eating foods that look like this or like this. So why in reality is it that you just want to eat foods that look like this or like this? This sort of dilemma, this internal struggle between pursuing something that is a long-term goal versus giving in to immediate rewards is something we all struggle with. Think about addiction. Data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention indicate that opioids killed more than 42,000 people in the year 2016, and every single day, more than 115 people die from an opioid overdose in this country. Think about cigarette smoking. Tobacco use continues to be one of the leading causes of preventable disease and death in the United States, and 80% of lung cancer deaths can be attributed to smoking. It may be the case that a cigarette smoker actually has this knowledge and has the best of intentions to quit smoking, but that does not mean that it is easy to resist the temptation of smoking that cigarette now, which would provide immediate satisfaction. Think about the obesity epidemic. Obesity currently affects 41 million children worldwide, and it is certainly the case that giving in to an immediate reward applies to food choices and eating behavior every single day. So one of the aspects of human decision-making that is so fascinating to me is that we often have the knowledge to understand what the best choice would be, right? So if I were to survey all of you, chances are that we would probably agree that it is better to eat healthy foods, it's better to get a good amount of exercise, better not to drink too much alcohol, and it is better not to smoke cigarettes. So it is striking to me that as humans, we often make choices that are not optimal for our health. So that brings us to today's theme, questioning the impossible, right? So if we know that we're so poor at making good decisions for ourselves, and if we know that we're pretty poor at delaying gratification, how do we actually make better decisions? It turns out there is compelling scientific evidence to suggest that we can change the way we think and make decisions for the better. Today, I am going to highlight 2 clever studies that indicate that there are ways that we can improve human decision-making and ultimately health outcomes. The first of these studies addresses something that we call an approach bias. So previous addiction research has identified a type of cognitive bias called an approach bias, which just means that people with addictions have automatic tendencies to approach or move towards any substance-related cues. So for example, someone with alcoholism would have automatic tendencies to approach or move towards alcohol. So the first of these studies addresses the question, can cognitive training actually improve decisions in addicts? And to do this, Weirs and colleagues designed an intervention in 2011 to actually target approach bias in alcoholic inpatients. Alcoholic inpatients participated as subjects in an experiment in which they were assigned to either an experimental group or a control group. In experimental group 1, participants were instructed to pull a joystick towards them anytime a picture of a non-alcoholic soft drink appeared, and to push a joystick away anytime a picture of an alcoholic drink appeared on the screen. The idea here is that pulling the joystick towards you simulates an approach-related movement, and pushing the joystick away simulates an avoidance movement. In experimental group 2, participants were instructed to pull the joystick towards them anytime the picture appeared in portrait format, a format that happened to be paired with pictures of non-alcoholic drinks, and to push the joystick away anytime the picture appeared in landscape format, which was a format that always happened to be paired with alcoholic drinks. Now what you'll see here is that participants in experimentals groups 1 and 2 are essentially participating in the same task, except in experimental group 2, this group received what we call an implicit condition because they were not explicitly instructed to attend to the pictures of the alcohol or the soft drinks. Then there was a control group that received a training that involved an equal number of push and pull movements to both alcohol and non-alcoholic drinks, and a control group that received no training. Participants completed 4 different training sessions on 4 consecutive days and were tested a week later for follow-up. Participants were also followed up with 1 year later to assess treatment outcomes at the 1-year mark. So, what did they find? So here, what we're looking at is approach bias towards alcohol in alcoholic inpatients. On the left, we have the results from the experimental groups, and on the right, the results from the control groups. And the gray bars here indicate pre-test scores, and black bars indicate post-test scores after the intervention was applied. Positive scores here indicate an approach bias, and negative scores indicate an avoidance bias. The striking finding here is that for the experimental groups, an approach bias actually turned into an avoidance bias after the intervention, meaning that participants were actually faster at pushing the joystick away from them than they were at pulling the joystick towards them when pictures of alcohol appeared. So this is a huge finding, especially given the fact that this occurred after only 4 training sessions. This finding also extended to other laboratory measures of automatic tendencies towards alcohol, and even more importantly, the experimental groups actually had better treatment outcomes when they were assessed 1 year later. So think about the implications of this research. A single brief training session actually changed alcoholics' automatic tendencies to approach alcohol. The second study asks the question, can we improve our eating habits? So this was a study conducted by Kokoschky and colleagues in 2014, and this is something many of us want to know the answer to, right? How can we actually improve our eating choices and our food choices and eating habits? And essentially what they did was they assigned participants to one of 2 groups. In group 1, participants were trained to direct their attention towards healthy foods. And in group 2, participants were trained to direct their attention to unhealthy foods. After this training session, all participants rated snacks, 4 different bowls of snacks, 2 bowls of healthy snacks, and 2 bowls of unhealthy snacks, and had to rate these foods based on different dimensions like sweetness or saltiness. Participants were told that they could try as much of the foods as they wanted to or needed to make these ratings, and experimenters weighed the bowls before and after participants tasted the foods to understand how much of each of these foods did participants consume. So here we're looking at the results, and we are looking at proportion of healthy food consumed for the 2 groups, the group that trained to attend to healthy foods and the group that had trained to pay attention to unhealthy foods. So what they found was that for the group who had trained to pay attention to healthy foods, this group consumed a greater relative percentage of healthy snacks than the group that had trained to pay attention to unhealthy foods. So keep in mind, again, the implications of this research. This was a single training session that actually resulted in different food choices in the 2 groups, right? So just imagine what food choices would look like if participants had a longer training session or if the training session was somehow incorporated into their daily lives. So these findings highlight the importance of interventions that can change the way we think about rewarding stimuli in our environments. And in combination, these findings suggest that effective interventions can be designed to make us less likely to opt for an immediately rewarding option. Subtle experimental manipulations in the laboratory show great promise in terms of targeting addiction and promoting healthy behavior. So I'd like you to think about the implications of this research for your own lives and any situation in which you find yourself thinking about the present versus the future, right? So every single day, we are making decisions about whether to save money or spend it. We are making decisions about what types of food to eat and whether to get exercise. We may have experience trying to quit smoking or battling addiction. I hope that I have convinced you today that human judgment and decision-making is malleable, is able to change. And I encourage you to think about what this means in terms of bettering our own lives and the future of the world we live in. Thank you.